When people talk about leaving the United States, they usually frame it in practical terms: cost of living, healthcare, work pressure, stress, and for many people, those reasons are real. Leaving feels like relief, like stepping off a treadmill that never slows down, like choosing sanity over struggle. So, emotionally, it's supposed to feel lighter, calmer, freer, more balanced. And at first it does. But that initial relief hides a different kind of cost, one that doesn't show up until the pressure is gone. To understand the emotional cost of leaving the United States, you have to stop thinking about emotion as feeling and start thinking about it as attachment to momentum. In the US, pressure isn't just economic, it's emotional scaffolding. You have deadlines, you have expectations, benchmarks, you have comparison. Even when it's exhausting, it gives your emotions shape. You know where you stand, you know what progress looks like, you know what falling behind looks like. When you leave, that structure disappears almost overnight. And emotional freedom without structure doesn't feel like peace for very long. It feels like floating. There's something subtle people don't anticipate. In the US, emotional shorthand exists everywhere. You don't need to explain burnout, hustle fatigue, career anxiety, falling behind financially. People already get that. Abroad, that shared emotional context often vanishes. You may speak the language, but your emotional references don't land. So you talk less, you explain less, and you share less. Not because you're hiding, but because translation costs too much. Back home, your identity is constantly mirrored. Your work, your trajectory, your social role, even resistance to the system is still recognized by it. When you leave, that mirroring stops. Your wins feel quieter, your losses feel internal, your progress lacks witnesses, and emotions that aren't reflected eventually lose intensity. Not dramatically, gradually. At this point, the obvious conclusion appears. So, you just need to build a new community. That's what people think. But that explanation collapses because even with friends, even with routine, even with comfort, something still feels muted, which means community alone doesn't restore what was lost. Here's what's actually happening: leaving the US doesn't just remove stress, it removes emotional contrast. In high pressure systems, emotion is sharpened by friction. Success feels earned, failure feels consequential, and time feels scarce. When that friction disappears, emotion flattens, not into happiness, into neutrality. And neutrality is stable, but it also emotionally is quiet. This is why some people say, I'm calmer, but also feel less alive. This is the trade no one explains because it doesn't feel like loss at first. Over time, the emotional shift compounds. You stop measuring yourself the same way. You stop caring about certain outcomes. You stop feeling urgency. And urgency, for better or worse, is part of how meaning is constructed. Eventually, the question comes up: am I more at peace, or have I just adapted to less intensity? And there's no clear answer for that. And going back doesn't reverse it because once your emotional baseline resets, the old pressure doesn't feel motivating, it feels hostile. So leaving the US doesn't break you emotionally, it recalibrates you. And recalibration sounds neutral until you realize it changes what excites you, what scares you, and what feels worth pursuing. The hardest part isn't missing home, it's realizing that the version of you that once needed that pressure might not exist anymore, and deciding whether that's growth or something you didn't mean to trade away.